Good morning. Damn, I have to stay awake. Stay with me. I'm still on U.S. time, so please keep me awake. Welcome to the third conference we're having here in Paris with Hack in Paris. I'm very honored to be able to help out and be here for the third year. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I don't like microphones. Before we get started, a couple of things. SysDream is obviously doing a great job putting on this conference, and it has been growing wonderfully for 3 years, and hopefully we will continue to grow it over the coming years. A few notes after the first two presentations. We will have coffee break outside. For lunch, you have Disney. You have everything around in order to enjoy everything that they've got, hopefully in the rain. If you have not found it yet, there is free Wi-Fi. Please do not use your VPN so we can all hack in. Everybody have VPNs? Yes? Who does not have a VPN, and where do you work? These sessions we all hope to make interactive, make them discussions, and interestingly enough, there's going to be a lot on mobile. Mobile is certainly a very, very large subject today. And I have the honor to be able to be the opening speaker, and I'm going to be talking about mobile as well. So to begin, I don't have a lot of slides, and the reason I don't is I left my computer in Florida. But I have my tablet and no projection, of course. So I'm going to hopefully know what I'm talking about. One of the things that I hope we do is if I say things that you don't like and you don't agree with, raise your hand and yell at me. Everybody except for Jason Street. Because I don't want to hear what he's got to say about what I'm going to say. BYOD. In the United States, certainly, and around the world, everybody's getting crazy with bring your own device. I tend to call it more and more, and the more I see in big companies in Europe and in the United States, breach your own data. And we're seeing these things actually beginning right now. So when I look at BYOD, I like to look at it to help managers, to help the bosses who are non-technical understand what the risks really are of bringing these devices into the enterprise. Now, we all know that these devices were made for consumers. They were made for Angry Birds. They were made for telephones. That's about all they were designed to do. They have great facility. We can use them for many, many things, and suddenly everybody wants to bring these devices to work. How many of you still use BlackBerries? Not many. Cool. But your security has probably gone to hell in the process. And that's part of the problem with the risk that these folks are not understanding. Now, in the US at least, and in Canada, the argument is if you do not have a BYOD policy, you will not get anybody to come to work for you. Nobody wants to have BlackBerries anymore. They all want their fancy little devices, and that's fine and dandy. However, what is being forgotten is the true risk to the organization. And for some of you that may have gray hair like me, you may remember back to the 1980s when we brought PCs into the office. And we said, there is no risk to PCs, right? There is nothing that can go wrong. We will just plug PCs into our networks and everything will be just fine. And now we know certainly that was not true. As a security person, to me, this is the same thing we're doing all over again. We're bringing in new technology, but in this case, the technology was never designed for business. Early PCs were really not designed for business. The early PCs, if you remember, were designed to be able to connect to a mainframe computer, have 80 characters 25 lines, and that was it. That was the original design that IBM was hoping to do and sell more mainframes and more mini computers. And then it grew, and we had all the security problems because management ignored the risk. Same thing, we're doing it all over again, except these days it's worse. Right now, there are maybe almost 2 billion mobile devices running around the world. And that's a lot of devices suddenly connecting to networks. So when I ask large corporations and I ask the CISO or the CTO, how many mobile devices are connecting to your network? What kind of answer do I get? What answer do I get? I don't know. Now that, in my mind, is a big risk. If you do not know what is connected to your networks, how can you manage the device? How can you manage and control the data that you're supposed to be protecting? So in the last 15 years, with enterprise in our fixed computers, we have policy, we have enforcement, we have controls. We are trying to protect the data from compliance, privacy standpoint, security standpoint, health information, financial information. We're trying to protect all of that, and in companies, we do an okay job of that now. However, with BYOD, now we've got all of these devices connected to our networks. We don't know how many there are. We don't know, in too many cases, what they're actually doing. What are they doing on the networks? How many of you can measure and control your mobile devices very well? Now, was that a hand that went up, or were you just scratching, sir? Okay. We can. And I have no doubt many of you have told management we need to do something proper to make sure that we can control the data. So when I look at the risk factor of BYOD, we have to begin with a very fundamental premise that these devices, the operating systems, are fundamentally different than what we have been using with PCs. And throughout this conference, there's going to be several talks on mobile, because mobile is so important. Today we have 2 billion devices. By the end of this decade, we will have the Internet of Things, maybe 20 billion of these devices. And you will have your Google car. You will sit there reading a book while the car is driving itself. The car then will say to you, oh, your refrigerator just called the store and I'm taking you to pick up milk for your wife. All automatically. That is some of the Internet of Things. But what about the security controls that are in there? When I look at SCADA, when I look at ICS, industrial control systems, that are essentially mobile devices, there is no security. When we are putting in the United States and Canada, and certainly over here some, the smart grid, smart power, how much security has been designed into any of these systems? And the answer is almost zero. So the risk is certainly increasing. Now, with these devices, unfortunately, and I blame Apple, and if anybody here works for Apple, I am sorry, they introduced and are trying to say iOS has built-in security. How many people believe iOS has security? Was that your hand going up, or were you choking, sir? You were choking. There is no inherent security. However, Apple and some of the other vendors have done a great job of convincing some of the analysts, Gartner, Forrester, that there is security. And what do we call that security system that is built in, allegedly, to Android and iOS. What's it called? MDM. So MDM is security, correct? Everybody agree with that? Does anybody agree that MDM is security? Does management know the difference? Do your risk people understand the difference? Do your compliance people understand that MDM is not security? And here's the problem. MDM can be removed by the user at any time. That is the design of the system. And Steve Jobs said, I want to give the user complete control over his environment, which is fine. But should I be plugging that device into my enterprise network with access to all of my corporate data? And most of us will say absolutely not. So we've got this devices that the vendors are not telling us really the truth. We know the truth. The users can remove it. But more importantly, and you're going to see some of this throughout this conference, MDM has already been broken. And several of the MDM vendors, their security on the MDM is gone. And now it is being published. So from a risk standpoint, what does that mean to the company? They just spent 1 million, 2 million euros to have MDM security built into their entire company under the belief that they're getting security. What is going to happen? And what we are seeing happen, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, is who are the worst people we can ever think of having to deal with when it comes to security? What group of people in a company? Marketing? Oh, all right, fair enough. Worse than marketing. Worse than marketing. Lawyers. Lawyers are getting involved in security. They're the ones who help build compliance regulations, and that's why some of them are not so good, and they have guidance. They have a little bit of help towards what we're doing and what we're trying to protect, and protect the data so that the company does not get sued and is not in violation of any national laws, privacy laws, EU, US laws. So now, if a company has deployed, and you will see which vendors have been cracked, deploys MDM, and there is a data breach, whose fault is it? Is it the technical people's fault? Is it your fault? Or is it the risk people who did not properly look at implementing this technology? And then the network people having no idea what devices are connected and what sort of security is going on. The problem that you have with these devices is two very fundamental things. The operating system is a single user operating system. In a single user operating system, how can you administer controls? Anybody have any idea how to administer controls in a single user operating system? You can't. And as many papers have been coming out recently saying, MDM is only as secure as the operating system it is. If you have an operating system that cannot be secured, how can you use MDM for security? Yet, how much money? How many of your companies are using MDM? Yeah, okay, there's a bunch. And I'm sure many of you would be said, this is stupid. This is not secure, because what controls do you have? You have password controls. You have ActiveX remote. Sometimes it works to erase, sometimes it does not work to erase. So the risk factor is much higher. Now the other aspect of risk that occurs, and the management people tend to forget it, is these devices are small. How many of you have lost a complete PC in a taxi cab? How many of you have left a tablet in a taxi cab? I left a laptop at a conference in Florida, so yeah, some of you were lying. We've all lost something. With our mobile phones, men having them in their pockets, how many of us have lost those phones slipping out? The risk factor of the data is now also part of the physical world. So we have a second layer of risk here that we do not have with our fixed computers in our fixed environments. So the risk goes greatly up. Now, the other thing that the risk folks tend to ignore in the enterprise, does anybody know how many mobile devices are lost every year? Anybody know? Shout it out. Jason, come on, you got a number. A lot. A lot. That's a good technical number. A lot with zeros after it. The statistics are showing, and management is ignoring it, 1 out of 4 of your employees, 25% of your employees, will lose a mobile device every year. In the United States, it's 75 million are lost every year. Worldwide, we're looking at hundreds of millions of devices being lost, which is good for the phone companies. They get to sell more phones. But is that good for your data? Is this part of the risk analysis that is performed before we try to make these devices part of our networks and part of our enterprise? One of the things that the risk people over the years have done, and done very correctly, in your offices, do you allow your controlled multi-user PCs to have corporate data and personal data on the same machine? How many of you allow that in your organization? Small handful here. In our mobile environment, that is the goal. Have an insecure operating system, have both personal data and corporate data on it. How high is that risk now? The risk obviously goes way up, and because we know that 25% of people are going to lose their device every year, do we take that into account when we're measuring risk in deploying BYOD or breach your own data? We don't. And the reason we don't is because they're looking for the easy answer, and we all know that the easy answer tends to not be the secure answer. Now, the other solution that comes along, a lot of people like, is the concept of containerization or sandboxing. How many of you really like sandboxing? I got a couple hands here. Sir, down here, what kind of sandbox technology do you like?
Anyone for my learning.
Anyone? So you like, for example, good technology?
I hope it's good.
I'm sorry?
I hope it's good.
You hope it's good. Are you aware that good technology's container has been broken? You are aware, but you still want to use it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good technology is the first container that has been broken. And the reason is it is not that difficult to crack through some simple algorithms that they are using to build a container around it. They picked on good, the hackers picked on it because it is the big player in containerization. But we go back now to a risk look. If we know that a technology, a fundamental technology like containerization, virtualization, can be cracked in a single user device, how can management, how can the risk and compliance people say, yes, let's use a technology we know has been broken in the hopes that it won't be broken for your company, just somebody else's company? The other problem that you have with containerization and sandboxing, people want the original reason to bring their own devices. They like the user experience. Whether it's Android, iOS, or maybe Windows Mobile, if anybody using Windows Mobile? Did you raise your hand in order to get shot, or you use Windows Mobile? No, but your hand went up anyway. Thank you for that. I'm sorry? You have your turned off. So Windows Mobile is great when the power is off. Okay, fair enough. People buy and want to use these devices because of the user experience. Yet, when you go to containerization, what happens? You now have a custom browser. We all know building a browser is easy, isn't it? Really easy to build a secure browser. That's why Firefox never has a problem. Chrome never has a problem. So these companies that are building virtualized environment are changing the user experience with the browser, with the email client, with all of the things that are not what the user really wants and was the reason for BYOD in the first place. What is the enhanced risk? Unknown browsers built by a non-browser company, email clients built by a non-email client company in order to sell containerization security on a device that cannot be secured. And this is the risk factor that we are seeing in addition to all of the other issues. So we've got 25% of everybody's going to lose their device. MDM has been cracked. MDM is removable by the user. Containerization has already been cracked in one leading vendor, and more are going to come. And why are more going to come? Because we can do it. That is what we do. We break technology on purpose in the hopes of making things more secure and keeping the vendors honest and building good technology. Not good technologies, much better than good technologies. So with all of these risk factors, I ask myself, and I ask many of my clients, why are you doing this? And they say, we don't know any better. There is nothing else. And that's not entirely true. So what is it going to take? What will it take to get companies to realize that their risk is much higher in these environments and to either stop using MDM or use much better technologies? What's it going to take? Anybody know? Yeah, shout it out.
Price,
I'm sorry?
the cost of security,
The,
the cost of security.
the cost of security is more than MDM. It turns out, sir, that number, that's actually not true. IBM did a study, and I was with the CTO of IBM last October, and they bought a company called Tango and started deploying it internally. The cost factor for doing BYOD on a single device is between 2 and 4 times more expensive than what they used to do with BlackBerry. The old days, and some people still do, here's a BlackBerry, use it for work, don't do anything else. And it worked, and there was a fixed cost with that. Now, risk analysis people are always interested in cost benefit. And how much does it cost to protect data, protect the company against a potential security incident? Right now, it looks like it's 200 to 400% more to use a poor technology. So this makes a whole lot of sense to me. So what is it going to take to finally fix things? And back in the 1980s, the same question came up. And the answer was, the lawyers are coming, the lawyers are coming. So So what is going to happen? We've already seen a little bit of it in the United States. So you have your iPhone. There is a security incident of some sort. Your iPhone has got MDM controls back at the company, a security incident, and somebody says, I better push the erase button. Now your phone and all of your personal data is lost. In the United States, I'll sue you for that. Over here, you'll wait for us to start the lawsuits, and then you'll do your own lawsuits afterwards. So if you erase, as the company, my grandmother's last dying pictures, that is a big thing to us, big thing to most users. All of your emails erased, your device completely bricked, which is a secondary form of risk to the company because of the possibility of lawsuits. Now, you have your personal device. It's being run by either containers or MDM. Something goes wrong. The company now sees your personal data on your device, and it sees that you're doing something really bad, whatever bad thing it is. The company then fires you, reports you to law enforcement. There's an additional risk here to your personal data and your personal privacy by allowing MDM or any sort of mobile containerization technology to be used. Now you're at risk as an individual in addition to the company. So, let's look at the next level. With the United States, we've got the Patriot Act, we have the NSA listening to everything. Law enforcement comes to your company and says, Damien is a bad guy. We need to see everything he's been doing. So the company says to Damien, where is Damien, by the way? He's hiding probably. Company says, I need your device. Well, no, it's my device. You can't have it. Well, no, the law enforcement wants to see what's on your device because you may be doing something bad. What is the risk here? The risk is the legal system now determining that your device is no longer your device. It's now the company's device. And this is going to have to be tested in a court system. The legalities here are fairly crazy. We don't know the answer, which is why for so many years we have kept the difference between personal devices and business devices very, very separate. Why BlackBerries are company devices. If you have a company device and the company says, I want it, you got to give it back to them. That's fair enough. But if it's your device and the company is paying you 50 euros a month to be able to do some work on it, is that correct? Now, a lawsuit in the United States shows another level of risk that's coming up. In the city of Chicago, they issued stipends, $50, $100 a month, for the police department to use their own personal devices for a BYOD program. A few weeks ago, the Chicago police, through its union, is now suing the city of Chicago for millions of dollars. Not because of lost data, not because of security problems, but for another reason entirely. How many of you have your BYOD device on most of the time and at night? Right. And how many of your employers expect you to be available through that device almost any time? The Chicago police are suing for overtime for extra hours because they had to be available, connected, and if they turned off the phone we've got technical risks, we have social risks, we have compliance risks, we have so many risks that are involved in this, it really staggers me that we're actually allowing companies to take a technology, try to use it, and we know that it's going to be a failure because there are very few good mobile security answers. Now, I wrote a chart, if I can get this to work, and again, I apologize. My laptop is in Federal Express on an airplane now. I will make all of these charts available to you, email, and if it gets here, I'll give a copy to Lucy, and you can have them, and I'll be happy to give it away. What we did is came up with a chart and looking at what is the risk factor from the standpoint of the company. How much risk are they actually doing? So, we've got a full scale all the way down here to absolutely nothing whatsoever. And unfortunately, some companies are actually doing that. And you'll notice that there's risk numbers up there. There's a complete chart of all of the various levels of risk that also comes with this. So the next one that too many people are doing is we're doing MDM. I've discussed many of the levels of risk that we see there. But there's virtually, from our standpoint, from a security standpoint, there is very, very little. And now that it is cracked, and at the end of this conference, you'll learn exactly how to crack some of these alleged security solutions. So the next one that comes up is sandboxing, containerization. And the problem with containerization, of course, is that it has been cracked, it will continue to be cracked, and all of the other risks that are associated with it. So you'll notice that there's a new section there, and it's mobile device security management. And I have to look at what are we doing inside the enterprise? What have we spent 20 years developing technology, developing processes to make security reasonably good inside of the enterprise? And there's a number of things that we do. We have firewalls across every device, across every department. In some cases, we have SIMs, we have DLP, we have IPS. Some of them work on the multi-user PC laptop. Some of them are server-based and examining traffic. But in the world of mobile, we have something else that we do not have to worry about in the enterprise. And this additional risk is we never really know how our data is moving from the device to where we're talking to. Are we using Wi-Fi? Are we using 3G or 4G? Sometimes you don't know, and they're users. How many of your users would really have a clue and understand? This now goes back to risk again. If I have a container, and my container says, I'm going to only talk to the office over email in this browser, fine. As long as the container is working, we're okay. But what about the user side of the device? Is there any protection on the user side of the device at all? No. So that means that all traffic then is the same as it is with no encryption, no VPN, everything is in the clear. And we all know that users never make mistakes. Right? Show of hands, users never make mistakes. So at what point are they going to make a mistake and send company data over the personal side of the device in the clear without a VPN? And we're already seeing these things occur. And I'm sure some of you have actually used your devices at airports or at hotels and looked at the kind of traffic and passwords that are going back and forth, because even in MDM, you have nothing. You have zero protection whatsoever. And another layer of risk in iOS, you cannot centrally, through MDM, turn off Bluetooth. which means that unless your users are smart, Bluetooth is always on. If they turn it off, then they can't use their Bluetooth headset. They can't use it in the car. So then we have to trust the user when to turn Bluetooth on, when to turn Bluetooth off, because of the new Bluetooth war driving things that are going on now. Another layer of risk. So in order to mitigate, get rid of some of this risk, we need to look at the security very, very differently. Yet, at the same time, we can look at history and see what was done right. Does anybody know what mobile security was done right? What? Anybody? What mobile security was done correctly? BlackBerry. Think about it, BlackBerry. All traffic in and out of the device was encrypted using good encryption. The user could not turn it off. That is a good thing. Whether it was on Wi-Fi or over a carrier, the user could not turn off encryption. VPN was always on. The other thing that they had was firewall controls. Not very sophisticated, but they were okay. You could administer some levels of group control and policy across your BlackBerry population. How do you do that today using MDM or containerization? This guy's shaking his head, oh my God, I'm going to commit suicide tomorrow. How do you do that? You can't do that. So when we look at this chart of risk, there are various levels of technologies that are available that can add at least a VPN, maybe protect all of the traffic, maybe have mobile firewall controls, you can use existing SIMs, existing DLPs if you take this approach, but there's only one way to take this approach, and again it goes back to what BlackBerry did absolutely correctly. It was all managed and controlled in the cloud. Now, this cloud was a corporate cloud, admittedly, so administrators have control. How many of you are running centralized, full security controls across mobile devices that are similar to the level of security we had in BlackBerry that was an established acceptable risk? Now, many of you may be a little too young, but I see a few people with gray hair like me. Back in 2000, when BlackBerries and mobile began, what was one of the first things that occurred by the corporation? The company said, what is the risk? They performed extensive risk analysis in order to determine, is it worth the risk to have any of our communications, our email, the little bit of surfing you could do back then, across a mobile device? And because of the level of control that the user could not remove from the device, and the level of control that was given to the administrator, the risk was determined to be acceptable. Now, in your organizations, has that same level of risk analysis actually taken place? How many people have really done a hard risk analysis looking at the technology, looking at the problems with the users, that now they are going to be involved in the process, and security professionals really like to remove the user, keep the user out of it. He is going to screw it up. He is going to ruin it. Yet, with our current approaches, we've increased the risk so much because we're allowing the user to have total control of the device electronically and physically. We have lost all control. And from my standpoint, looking at it from a risk level, this is totally unacceptable. So, over the next day and a half, 2 days, you're going to be seeing some of the details on exactly how to break some of these things, which is now, because it is going to be open source, will obviously increase the risk. thing that is being forgotten at management level is that the bad guys are really smart. They're really smart, and when the bad guys see 1 billion people using a device that they know is not properly secured, what are the bad guys going to do? They're going to go after the mobile devices. 18 months ago, an analyst from Forrester, I had a debate with him in a magazine, and he said, mobile will never experience malware. And that was Forrester, 18 months ago. And I made the argument, you're an idiot. Of course we're going to see it, because we have seen it every time we introduce new technology. You are ignoring the risk. The problem that we've got, as well, is that management, and whether it's at the board level, the compliance level, they forget that security has 3 separate domains. It has the technical cyber domain, it has the physical domain, and in this case, how much stuff can you lose and leave at airports or leave at bars. Nobody ever leaves anything at a bar like an iPhone 5, right? That never happens. And you've got the human element. All 3 domains, in this case in mobile, represent unacceptable levels of risk if we consider the amount of risk analysis we have done in our fixed enterprises. We've set a very, very high bar there. But now we've thrown that out the window and said we will accept much more risk than we ever have before. So there are ways to do this. And at the end, I am a fan of 2 devices. I'm really a fan of it. Number 1, it's cheaper, a lot cheaper. Number 2, even with an air gap, 2 devices are physically separated from each other. The company could say, you have to use BlackBerry. I hate BlackBerry. Oh well, you're going to have to use BlackBerry if you want to work here. Or the organization can say they are going to support Samsung and Apple. Pick 2. Pick the device you want. We will give you a company-owned device, and we will lock it down with the same approach that we've done for 15 years with BlackBerry. What I do not understand, and maybe somebody throughout this conference can help me understand, is why we have been unable to get the risk folks, the management folks, to understand that ultimately staying where we were worked. Yet now we're trying to use poor technology, bad user controls, poor physical security, and deploy billions of these devices. So I don't have a cultural answer as to why. They are being forced, I'm told, by managers that we cannot hire people that they all want their own device. Well, let them have their own device. Let it be air-gapped. So I am very excited over the next couple of days to see Damien is coming up shortly to, yes, hello Damien, to show some of the issues that are going on with mobile. We've got some ARM technology. The ARM stuff is getting more and more sophisticated. New chips coming out all the time. We're going to be seeing some of the technologies and the problems with rootkitting on ARM devices later today or tomorrow. Later today, we're going to see how to crack, and I think they said, we're going to teach you how to crack mobile iron. And that's kind of cool to see how to actually go through that, because the bad guys already know how to do it. The good guys are starting to learn, and management still has been unwilling to analyze the mobile problem from a level of risk. Now, I know I've outlined a lot of problems here. There is one other potential solution, and one that some companies like, some don't, and it's very simply called the Citrix model. Have 0 company data on the device. Period, end of story. No company data on the device. No data at rest. And Citrix will allow that, and some companies are actually taking that approach. study in the United States a couple weeks ago said that there are 14% of companies in the US who are saying 2 devices only 2 devices. We've got another 50% that are trying to use MDM and trying to use containerization, and they're recognizing that this is not going to really work. And then we have the rest of them who have no clue, no idea whatsoever is what is connected to their networks at all, and they have done nothing. So in the US, we're going to start lawsuits. And whether it's from the government, from the NSA, whether it's from private citizens suing vendors because of poor security or misrepresentation, I don't know which is going to happen first. But at one point, we're going to have to, as a community, really start examining and measuring, which we can do reasonably well. We have enough statistics. The risk factor that we have introduced into our companies, and whether it's going to be the first mobile breach of corporate data with a few million records because somebody does something stupid at the user level, or a technology was sufficiently hacked by the bad guys to allow them remote access into a corporation. Is that going to be China? Is it going to be Eastern European gangs? I don't know which it is going to be. Somebody's going to do it, and it's going to happen. Because we as a community, unfortunately, in this case, have completely failed to properly analyze mobile risk and take the correct steps to be able to implement security into this new environment. So before we get started into Damien's presentation, I saw a couple of hands. Are there any questions or comments? I saw something in the rear. Sir, yes, shout it out, please.
My experience is there were a lot of people, risk analyzers, who doing risk analysis, and they said, hey management, this is a huge risk, and the management said, hey, you know what, I don't give a fuck.
Well, if management says I don't give a fuck, that's great, until they get sued.
Yeah, but we also said this, and they said, okay, then we have to get something like sandboxing to reduce the risk, so I can say I did something, and then I probably won't get sued.
What management, and when the first lawsuit hits, I can hear it now in court. Well, we tried to do something. We used MDM. Well, did you go to the Hack in Paris conference? Did you read any magazines? Did you follow up any of the technology to understand the risk level of this? Were you doing something, or were you doing the absolute least you possibly could? And does it meet the expected level of security that you've used everywhere else? Here's a fundamental question I would ask if I was in court. Why, after you used to spend $10 million making your enterprise compliant with reasonable levels of security, why did you choose to use less security, less compliance in a more hostile environment?
Yeah, and the answer is because I don't want to have 2 phones in my pocket.
And what is the jury going to say to that?
No, this was a real answer. I was also shocked, but it was really like, hey, do whatever it costs. I don't want to have 2 phones.
And do you believe that that idea is going to live, or do you think we're going to end up back with 2 phones, or do you think that they're going to change? How do you see this ending up? How do you see the resolution to this?
In my opinion, the Citrix model that you don't really have any data really on your phone, but just do the.
All right, so you like the Citrix model. And I don't mind the Citrix model. I like the Citrix model. On the other hand, you have salespeople, you have your marketing people who on their phone want to have all the company data, all the company brochures. They want to be able to show PowerPoints. I agree with you. I agree. Citrix is a very simple, inexpensive answer. But not every house is a Citrix shop either. So I appreciate your comments. I agree. I'm just not convinced yet that that is going to be the answer for everybody. I think we're going to end up with many answers, and I would love to argue with you about this a little bit later, and I'd love to argue and get your ideas throughout the conference, because I don't have all the answers. I have some ideas, and I know what my risk clients have been telling me. So I want to thank you for your kind attention on getting this going, and since we're talking about so much mobile, it's entirely appropriate that our next speakers are going to be talking about mobile as well. Damien, are you here? Damien? Damien, you're on. So I'd like to introduce Damien Coquille and Pierre Jory, and they're going to be looking at remote Android applications. And thank you very much. Enjoy the conference. And if anybody, if you need any assistance at all, just look for either me or any of the folks that have the staff badges, and we will absolutely take care of you. If you'd like these slides, please just let me know.